Hello. Price and protectionism. One is compelled, upon examining the latest pronouncement from the Trumpian corner of the political circus, to marvel at the sheer, unadulterated buffoonery of it all. The grand proposal to abolish the income tax and, in its stead, erect a mighty wall of tariffs is presented as a masterstroke of economic wizardry. In reality, it is a scheme so transparently witless, so magnificently absurd, that only a true believer in the politics of sentiment and spectacle could fail to see through its gaudy facade. The grand and glorious tariff, the economic equivalent of sawing off the tree branch you're sitting on while loudly declaring yourself a master lumberjack. The central conceit, a notion so deliciously simple as to be irresistible to the simple-minded, is that these new taxes, for let us not mince words, a tariff is a tax plain and simple, will be paid by the wily foreigner. The Chinese, the Germans, the Mexicans, and all the other mercantile boogeymen will, we are told, graciously foot the bill for our national expenditures. This, of course, is poppycock of the highest order. Tariffs are not, as Trump seems to believe, a magic money fountain spouting gold coins from foreign lands. No, they are simply taxes dressed in nationalist drag, paid not by a foreign potentate, but by the poor American schmo who has the temerity to import goods, the American importer who pays the piper and passes the melodious cost along to the great, unwashed masses of the consuming public as they wail softly in the checkout line. Let us dissect this masterstroke of economic alchemy. To trade the income tax for a tariff is not to abolish taxation, but to engage in a bit of fiscal sleight of hand. It is to swap a tax on what a man earns for a tax on what he buys. The whole affair is a marvelous cosmic joke, a game of now you see it, now you don't, with the taxpayer's wallet as the ever-disappearing pea. The government, you see, will always get its cut. The only real question is from whose pocket it will be extracted. By shifting the burden from the sweat of a man's brow to the contents of his shopping cart, we are told we will be liberated. Liberated from what, precisely? From the tedious business of pretending that the tax code has any semblance of fairness or logic, perhaps. A tariff is a consumption tax in a particularly ill-fitting disguise, one that hikes prices on everything from socks to semiconductors. The wealthy, those nimble fiscal acrobats, will simply pirouette away from pricier imports while muttering about vulgar mass-produced goods. But the middle class? They'll be left holding the bill, staring in horror as their grocery receipts inflate like a balloon at a clown convention. Herein lies the cruelest jest of all. This grand plan, peddled as a boon to the common man, would in practice be a leaden cudgel to his financial well-being. The working stiff, the salaried drone, the very salt of the earth that our political mountebanks so profess to adore, would find himself disproportionately burdened. For it is the man of modest means who spends the lion's share of his income on the necessities of life, many of which arrive on our shores in the holds of container ships. The nabob, the plutocrat, the fellow whose income flows not from a weekly paycheck, but from the mysterious ether of investments, would, of course, skate by relatively unscathed. He, after all, consumes but a fraction of his vast fortune. A 25% tariff on all imports could lead to a 10 to 20% increase in consumer prices. Imagine, if you will, a family of 4 earning $60,000 a year. Under Trump's tariff utopia, they'll save a few grand in income taxes only to promptly hand it right back, plus interest, in the form of a 20% markup on shoes, cars, and, God help them, avocados. The math is simple. The less you earn, the more of your income vanishes into the tariff abyss. It's surreptitiously implementing a regressive tax and calling it a victory for the common man. A true Alice in Wonderland move, down is up, pain is gain, and the middle class plays Mad Hatter, laughing hysterically as their wallets empty. The glorious inflationary pressures this scheme would unleash. To imagine that one can slap a hefty tax on all that is foreign-made without sending prices soaring, is to engage in a form of economic magical thinking. The American marketplace, so deeply intertwined with the global web of commerce, would be convulsed. From the humble t-shirt to the sophisticated iPad, the cost of living would balloon, a great economic gout afflicting the body politic. America runs on imports like a caffeinated insomniac runs on espresso. Slap tariffs on everything, and prices will ripple outward like a financial shockwave, turning made in China into paid by you sucker. The rich, of course, will barely notice. Their portfolios will keep expanding while the rest of us ration toilet paper. The great promise of a tax cut would be revealed for what it is, a mirage in the desert of economic illiteracy. And so, the great wheel of economic justice, or what passes for it in our benighted republic, would be given a sharp turn in the wrong direction. The gap between the haves and the have-nots would yawn ever wider. The middle class would be squeezed ever tighter, and the whole farcical enterprise would be presided over by a chorus of self-satisfied politicians, each congratulating the other on a job well done. It is a spectacle worthy of the gods of irony, a divine comedy for an age of political burlesque. One can only sit back and marvel at the endless capacity of the American people to be so thoroughly and enthusiastically bamboozled. Trump's grand plan: shift the tax burden from those who can afford it to those who can't, then sell it as populism. It's like convincing a drowning man that what he really needs is a heavier anchor. But hey, at least we'll all be patriotic as we go bankrupt. God bless America. Economic folly on a global scale. The gospel of tariffs, that grand economic pantomime where nations don their armor of duties and strut into the global bazaar, only to trip over their own hubris. Picture, if you will, a world where tariffs, those surly gatekeepers of commerce, are hoisted like battle flags, promising riches but delivering a cosmic pratfall. The United States striding into the global marketplace, clad in a suit of tariffs, convinced it can outwit the world by taxing every foreign widget and doodad that dares cross its borders. But the world is not a passive audience to this economic theater. Instead, trading partners respond in kind, launching a retaliatory ballet of tariffs, transforming what could have been a waltz of mutual prosperity into a frenzied dance of economic self-sabotage. The tariff is a blunt cudgel wielded with the finesse of a drunken blacksmith. Slap a tax on foreign wares, and what do you get? Not a golden age of industry, but a chorus of indignant trading partners, each sharpening their own retaliatory blades. The world's markets, once a bustling souk of mutual gain, morph into a grim cage match. Trade wars, it turns out, are less like heroic duels and more like food fights in the world's most expensive cafeteria. Everyone ends up wearing the soup, and no one gets dessert. History, that stern, unsentimental, and merciless schoolmarm, has already marked our report card and waves her ruler. Recall Trump's first-term tariff salvos against China, which sparked a tit-for-tat spectacle that left American farmers and manufacturers nursing their wounds. They watched their export markets evaporate, not with a bang, but with a bureaucratic whimper. Soybeans rotted, factories sulked, and the heartland learned that economic aggression is a boomerang, not a bazooka. And if tariffs are applied with the subtlety of a maul, say on medical equipment or rare earth minerals, the U.S. can find itself facing shortages in sectors where scarcity is not just inconvenient, but dangerous. Of course, there's the small matter of international law. Trump's grand tariff scheme would almost certainly run afoul of World Trade Organization, WTO, agreements, not to mention a laundry list of bilateral and multilateral treaties. The WTO, that creaky cathedral of global commerce, would clutch its pearls at such brazen defiance. A tariff-based revenue system? Why, it's a middle finger to every trade treaty penned in earnest. The U.S. would face a barrage of legal challenges, sanctions, and the cold shoulder from allies who'd rather cozy up in regional trade blocs than deal with Uncle Sam's caprice. De-dollarization, That specter haunting the greenback would gain steam as nations seek shelter from America's fiscal tantrums. The American people, always eager to shoot themselves in the foot, have now aimed for both knees. Modern manufacturing is a marvel of international cooperation, a relay race where parts zigzag across borders with the nervous energy of caffeinated squirrels. Tariffs, however, are the banana peels on this track. Global supply chains, those delicate arteries of modern manufacturing, would seize up under the weight of prohibitive tariffs. Companies, faced with ruinous costs, would pass the pain to consumers. They must either absorb the new costs, like sponges in a flood, or uproot their entire operations, neither of which is a recipe for economic serenity. In trying to grasp the flow of trade, we choke it and find ourselves gasping. High tariffs will coddle domestic industries, shielding them from the invigorating slap of competition. The result is less innovation, more stagnation, and an economy that moves with all the urgency of a three-legged tortoise on a hot day. In other words, by shielding domestic industries from the bracing winds of competition, tariffs would dull the edge of innovation, leaving us with complacent factories churning out yesterday's goods at tomorrow's prices. This supposed cure for economic vulnerability becomes in practice a prescription for mediocrity. But the crowning irony lies in the national security sermon preached by tariff evangelists. Relying on import taxes for revenue is like betting your fortress on a sandcastle. When the economy slumps, imports dwindle, and so does the Treasury's take, precisely when the government needs coin for its cannons. Hostile nations, sensing weakness, could throttle their exports to the U.S., turning trade into a geopolitical chokehold. The result? A federal budget teetering on the brink, with deficits yawning wider than a politician's promises. And then, the grand irony. Relying on tariffs for government revenue is a bit like funding your retirement by playing the lottery. It works beautifully until it doesn't. When the economy falters and imports dry up, so too does tariff revenue, precisely when the government needs it most. Meanwhile, adversaries can weaponize trade with the flick of a pen, destabilizing the federal budget and forcing the country to contemplate austerity cuts to things like defense, infrastructure, or heaven forbid, the Department of Bridge Repair. This tariff tango, this dance of delusion, where each step courts calamity. The world's markets are not a zero-sum game, but a cosmic waltz, where harmony breeds prosperity and discord begets ruin. The economy, like the Tao, flows best when we stop trying to dam it. The harder you try to control the world, the more it slips through your fingers, like sand, or in this case, global prosperity. In the end, a tariff-based revenue system is the economic equivalent of curing a headache with a sledgehammer. Dramatic, noisy, and almost guaranteed to make things worse. If you must tax something, tax stupidity. It's the one resource we'll never exhaust. For every complex problem, there is an answer that is clear, simple, and wrong. And the only thing more dangerous than an enemy is a fool with a plan. Economic folly on a global scale.